Hi, I'm Short Mike and you're watching a movie, Horizon Line. One strange couple flying to a girl's friend's wedding got into a plane crash. Not knowing how to drive a plane, left without water and gasoline, did they manage to resolve such a difficult situation, and you will find out after watching to the end. It all starts with the fact that we see a man and a woman sitting at a table and drinking beer watching a video clip, remembering the past and how good it was for them. Sarah O. Jones looks happy. Remember them like this, because soon all this romance will turn into something unpredictable. Chatting sweetly, Jackson jokes about how he stole her panties and they laugh, but suddenly a conversation about Sarah's work came up. It turns out that Sarah's vacation is ending and it's time for her to go to London. The fact is that Jackson is happy to be on the island and he is not going to leave. The beer is running out, so before Sarah leaves, he offers her another bottle. She agrees. But when Jackson departs, Sarah, who does not like to say goodbye, leaves. Passing Jackson realizes what happened. A year later, we are shown a grey and gloomy London. A taxi pulls up to one of the buildings, and Sarah gets in there. She's going on vacation again. Her friend Pascal is getting married. Sarah is going to a friend's wedding as a friend of the bride. On the way, Pascal asks Sarah for a favor. Arriving on the island where her padraga lives, she drives a jeep along the road, cornfields through it. Driving along the way, the London office calls her. She throws down the phone and turns down the volume of the radio. Arriving at the site, she calls the owners, but suddenly a dog chases her, but everything turned out having managed to climb the fence. Solomon drives the dog away. He is its owner. Sarah and Solomon are old friends. She came to him for a drink. Since Solomon makes good and expensive drinks, he is a master of this business. Sarah picks up Pascal's order and goes to her friend. Sarah, Pascal and a few other friends are resting near the waterfall. Apparently they have a bachelorette party before the wedding. Pascal offers to go down and have a cocktail, and so a friend drags Sarah and they jump into the waterfall laughing heartily. Walking along the beach, Pascal takes cocktails and goes to a friend, sitting in a gazebo. They talk about everything. Sarah notices the same Jackson, from whom she ran away a year ago without saying goodbye. Then Pascal informs that there will be a party tonight. Sarah pretends she doesn't want to go. But in the evening, having painted her lips, she stands on the beach, looking at Jackson. A friend comes up and says, "Who are you looking at?" He replied that he was trying to gain courage. After finishing her cigarette, she approaches him and leads an awkward conversation with him. Jackson apparently has a slight grudge against her and not really wanting to talk, he leaves. Sarah catches up with him and they start chatting. She takes his hand. Going into the house, they drink a little, try on the equipment and say how good they were with each other, but she ruined everything that she left. He says again that he can't sit in a high-rise and she can't be on vacation forever. At the end of the conversation, they try to shut each other up, kiss passionately and have sex. In the morning, Sarah runs away. She sees that she is late for the ferry and therefore calls in a hurry Fred. This is an old friend of Sarah's. She asks him to fly with her to Rodriguez, where Pascal's wedding will take place. He agrees. When they arrive, they hug and at that moment Jackson comes. Seeing a guy who is also going to fly with Fred, Sarah feels embarrassed that she ran away again in the morning. They get on the plane and start taking off. And so, flying Fred talks to Sarah, and says he gets behind the wheel of the co-pilot. He remembers how Sarah flew on an airplane. Fred asks about her boyfriend, but she says it's nothing serious, and when they see a picture of Fred's wife, who has already passed away, they get upset. He begins to remember her. Telling her to try to drive a plane, he tells her what to look at when flying. And suddenly Fred has an attack. He falls on the steering wheel and the plane flies down. The guy hit, and while the plane recovered, it picked up speed. Sarah barely managed to straighten it before the ocean. Jackson tries to resuscitate the old man, but after a while Fred dies. Jackson and Sarah take control into their own hands. Realizing that the jeep is broken, and that they have half a tank of fuel left, Jackson notices the navigator. He and Sarah calculate the coordinates and fly along them. Then they notice the radio, and after a while they get in touch with a certain village Eric through this radio. And suddenly they get caught in a storm. Sarah moves to the pilot's seat to see the instrument panel. Because of the fear of dying, Sarah begins to lift the plane up. Through the pain of the fear of dying, they break through the storm clouds and fly through the peaceful sky. But grace does not last long. Sarah and Jackson begin altitude sickness, because of which they lose consciousness and the plane began to lose altitude. And suddenly, with the last of his strength, Jackson lifts Sarah off the steering wheel and they take off together, almost crashing into the sea. Having no compass, Jackson remembers that you can magnify a needle and put it on a liquid and it will show the north. Having broken through all the fear and storm, they faced one problem again. The fact is that their fuel began to drop rapidly and they immediately guessed that they needed to go to the gun. Jackson tied himself with a cord around his waist and climbed onto the gun. It was an incredible, difficult ordeal. After all, when he was climbing back into the plane, he fell off and almost fell, as a result of which he broke his arm and it was an open fracture of his left arm. Sarah took a stick and a bandage and began to bandage Jackson's arm. Having sat at the controls, they came up with the idea to dump the cargo in order to lighten the plane and gain time. Sarah dropped almost all the things and then it was time to release the body of Fred, who, as we remember, died due to a heart attack. You can see from the footage how hard it was for her to do, because this will be their last meeting. Sarah let him go overboard. Wanting to throw away the box of cognac, Jackson offered to pour it into the tanks, because it contains ethanol, which is used for airplane fuel. But it's not that simple. The fuel tank was located outside the aircraft, on the wing. After arguing with Jackson, Sarah climbed on the wing. For Sarah, it's insanely scary and hard. Just look how she got to the tank. The first bottle was delivered by Sarah directly to the tank, then the second and third. While serving the bottle, Jackson saw an island in the sea. When it was the turn of the fourth bottle, he released the steering wheel slightly and took the fourth bottle, but because of the push, the bottle broke and Sarah on the wing almost flew off the wing, but everything went well. Then, in an attempt to return to the plane, he stumbles, falls, but, catching his hand, flies into the cabin of the plane and sits motionless for a couple of minutes with frightened eyes. Jackson, having told about the island that he saw together with Sarah, begin to look for him. They understand that this is a one-way trip. 40 or 50 minutes have passed and nothing is found, and looking at the tank they see that 5% of the fuel is not released in the hope of finding this island that Jackson saw. Turning her head to the side window, Sarah notices the island with screams. And she and Jackson are glad they found him. But the joy does not last long, because the plane needs to be landed, which Sarah does not know how to do, although she took a couple of lessons from the deceased Fred. Taking the helm, Sarah begins to land the plane. Although the plane has already run out of fuel, but when they plan through the air, they descend 100 meters, 50, 40, 30, 10 meters and the plane crashing begins to sink. Having already sunk to the bottom, Sarah regained consciousness and began to get out of the crashed plane, saving Jackson. Both get out to the island, where Sarah began to pump Jackson out. After pumping them out, they fall asleep. After a little sleep, when they woke up, they realized that they were not on an island, but on an ice spit, which, according to Jackson, would go underwater with the tide. And again the problem. Here they no longer expected anything and just started waiting. After a certain period of time, the island went underwater. Sarah and Jackson holding each other started saying goodbye to each other, and Jackson offering to leave Sarah a vest, gets rejected by Sarah and eventually swimming in the ocean just waiting for their end. A shark swims past them. Exhausted, they heard screams, a passing boat, and here it is, salvation. In the end, they laugh, rejoice, kiss and can't believe what they've been through. This is the end of the film. If you are interested in other exciting movies, then go to the channel and watch new videos, and of course slap a like for my efforts.